tree seedling or sponsorship of one school with 20 grafted fruit tree seedlings for only 3,000 shillings, you can be part of this noble cause as we strive to achieve the vision of a green, nutrition secure and fruity country. And what's more, your name will be entered in Africa's Fruity Book of Fame that will recognize you as an environmental champion for prosperity. Let there be fruits in schools. Join us in making our schools greener and fruity. The Fruity Schools Project Africa is a joint initiative by Fruity Schools Africa and Standard Group.
KTN News. Get the whole story.
Or the Arabic Al-Alam channel. The US has accused media outlets connected to Iran's Revolutionary Guard of spreading disinformation. Mike Hanna has more from Washington, D.C.
The Justice Department says that the Iranian Television and Radio Union had been designated a special entity back in October last year because of what it alleged was election interference. This requires all of its bodies to get special permission to operate in the United States, which the Justice Department said it did not do. So as a result, some 33 entities have been shut down, or the website.
This is KTN News.
Fried ginger has ginger oil, which is good for a healthy living lifestyle. It combines wonderfully on salads, stir-fries, when basted on roasted meat or simply sprinkled on your favorite dish. Available in 250 ml, 500 ml and 1 liter. Do your callers frequently ask you what stories made the news headlines? Introducing the Call Bulletin, courtesy of Skiza. You can now keep your callers informed and up to date with the latest news updates from KTN News, courtesy of Skiza. Dial star 811 star 795 hash to subscribe today. Set the tone with Skiza.
This is KTN News.
A very good morning to you. Welcome to the broadcast. You're watching Morning Express. Welcome. My name is Jesse Rogers. Always a pleasure to have you with us. It being a Wednesday, of course, we take a look at the latest covered in the papers, but also we keep our finger on the pulse of the economy. Much more coming up.
Thank you so much for making the time to join us this morning. Today, also being a Wednesday, we like to focus on your health. And today we shall be digging into a report that reveals that mental health is at epidemic proportions in the country. What does the government need to do to handle this situation? They're always working on the economy, politics, and so much more. But at the same time, we're having a population that is suffering from debilitating mental health situations, but they are white-knuckling it through. So we're going to take a look at that and dig deeper into that, and later on also give you the very latest making headlines across borders. So stay tuned.
Speaking of the latest making headlines across the borders, let's take a look at what is transpiring internationally. We begin closer home. Our neighbors Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda. As usual, we just want to take a look at what's happening there. Let's begin with the Daily Monitor. The latest from Uganda. Delayed rollout of a second jab causes anxiety. That seems to be the latest in terms of the vaccination drive in the country, where the president actually expects to get additional 688,000 doses of the vaccine in August. And let's see if that actually transpires. MPs lack offices, work in corridors, where members of parliament say this has made their work difficult. Interesting developments happening there as Rwanda even cancels weddings as COVID cases surge. The latest happening from Rwanda right there. Make sure you're adequately informed. Museveni outlines 5 key points for cabinet, even as he sets the agenda for the next term in office. That is the latest from Uganda. Make sure you're adequately informed. Over to the East African. Let's see what's covered here. Uganda's Olympic team quarantined in Japan. The athletes were actually allowed to travel from the airport to the training base in the Osaka region. And of course, key cutting measures to ensure that the spread of COVID-19 does not happen, even with other developments ongoing, like the Olympics. Counting underway in historic Ethiopia polls. Of course, just this week, we saw various regions in Ethiopia head to the polls, and what has been termed as a free, fair poll, one of many firsts in the country. COVID-19, Rwanda tightens restrictions. Just as we mentioned, some weddings have actually been cancelled in Rwanda due to the surge in COVID-19 cases. More details from Rwanda. Over to Rwanda today. Let's take a look. CR gives Rwanda 200,000 hectares. What shall we do with the land? The big question, where Central African Republic has actually offered Rwanda a parcel of land which seems to be idle till date. More details right there. Even as I mentioned earlier, Rwanda is tightening restrictions due to a surge. 3,727 active coronavirus cases in the country. Over to the Citizen. The latest from Tanzania, out to clarify more on COVID-19 vaccination. That is the front the government has taken with issues to do with clarification and awareness of the COVID-19 vaccination drive in the country. And of course, President Samia taking a different direction in terms of inoculating the population. Our salaries, packs are not enough, says Tanzanian lawmaker. Interesting, where a member of parliament has actually asked his fellow lawmakers to publicly state what they're being paid. People should know that their salaries are not enough. More details on that particular story. Over to CNN World News. Let's take a look at what has been covered here. How Brazil's fear of losing the Amazon guides Bolsonaro's policies towards the forest. Of course, the Amazon being a key cog in the economic development in Brazil. More details on that particular article, even as they cover stories around Europe, Middle East, and Africa as well. How the Iron Age people kept mementos of dead loved ones. Just an interesting twist, an interesting story right there. Make sure you're adequately informed. That's the latest in terms of the international developments. And of course, we also want to cover what is happening locally. The dailies taking part in highlighting some of the stories that are making headlines on the front page of Kenya's Bold newspaper. It's all to do with parliamentarians, where the lawmakers said a big no. Wanjiku wins as MPs reject Yatani's taxes, where the prices of chapati and ugali are likely to go down after legislators jolted Treasury's revenue-raising plan by making changes to the Finance Bill 2021 to ease growing burden on Kenyans. Well, a reprieve right there, where you have the winners highlighted on the front page of the Daily. Ugali, chapati, boda bodas as well being some of the winners, including infant food buyers. More details right there. Let's just take a look at what's covered on the front page of the Daily Nation. They've gone with a similar story, where members of parliament have actually blocked tax on bread and boda boda, where the Treasury CS is actually between a rock and a hard place, and he had proposed new taxes to boost Kenya's revenue collection. But the National Assembly Finance Committee has shot down the measures, arguing that these are basic items which should be zero rated. That's on the front page of the Daily Nation, even as they highlight Uhuru's big fight back in Ruto's turf, highlighting the president's regional tour in that particular Rift Valley region. More details right there. and we'll definitely get to cover them. Allow me to introduce my panelists just to help us peruse through some of these stories making headlines. In studio, I'm joined by Sakwa Bunyasi, who's the Member of Parliament for Nambale constituency. It's always a pleasure to have you with us, sir. We're also joined by Stephen Mwakesi, who is a public policy analyst. And of course, we also have the pleasure of having Professor Emmanuel Mutisia, who is an economist. Gentlemen, as always, thank you for your time and good morning. Let's start with the front page and of course Reprieve. We'll get to discuss more about it in totality later on at 7 a.m. But this is what Wanjiku perhaps was waiting for. Sakwa Bunyasi, perhaps you're in Parliament. Tell us how it all went down. The committee definitely playing a big part in stopping these changes proposed by CS Yatani.
Thanks very much, Jesse, and my colleagues on the panel. As you know, when proposals get into Parliament, like the finance bill would from the Treasury, the landing point after the administration of Parliament is the committee, the Finance Committee. They get the chance to look at every line of it and to listen to submissions and petitions from the public and other interested stakeholders. And together, they make recommendations that will go to the floor of the House, and they have done a good job at the gate there, the gatekeeping work there, which is to say what is outlandish, what is it that stakeholders do not like or would like to have, how would it play out on the floor of the House. So they came up, I think, quite well. I think the original proposal had been that what is shown here, 0%, zero rated, would have been exempt. And there are implications for when you allow zero rating and versus an exemption. I think it's too technical to waste time on it, but the key thing is that with the zero rating, the taxes on inputs are reclaimable so that you do not in any way or form add costs to the ultimate consumer. That's how the 0% is a more useful thing than exemption. But you can see some leaning towards what you might also call is something of Wanjiku interest, the border now. I think the border transport has now sometimes incipiently and sometimes overtly grown so big that I think many parts of the country depend on border for transportation. Many people do. A large majority of Kenyans daily are moved by borders more than the other public transport systems. So I think you can see that there is an attempt to provide some relief to those. For exporters, I think it's obvious we should never have been allowing any taxes on our exports to allow a faster growth of taxes. So it did play out. We have only had 1 day of debate. We'll continue to have the debate today.
Okay.
And I think the heat will be, a lot of people will be able to ventilate, as we say. I think that's the right thing. They'll ventilate as they debate.
Let's see the quality of debate that will be on the floor of the House today. But Mutisia, this is definitely reprieve to the common taxpayer in terms of the burden on them. But it definitely poses a bigger issue to Kenya Revenue Authority, who are burdened in collecting taxes, meeting the targets. What say you about this?
Well, just thank you very much, and thank you very much to my panelists here. I'm excited. That of course we are discussing something that is affecting the common mwananchi. But let me start by saying that when you tax basic goods and services, it doesn't always mean that you're going to get the revenues that you are looking forward to. Why? Because increasing taxes always affects the supply and demand. It affects consumer behavior. It affects the equilibrium price. That of course is geared towards raising the funds that the government is looking forward to. And then at the end, the government will, because of that consumer behavior impact, you end up not getting the resources that you might be looking forward to. Now, when I look at the two elements that the members of parliament did sort of reject, based on what the CS presented, I think bread, of course, boda, these are two very important services or products that every other Kenyan at the bottom of the pyramid is using or is consuming. Now, when you increase the taxes on these two elements, then it means that the price is pushed or the cost is pushed to the citizen, who in turn might not be able to sort of cover the increase in price. And in times like this, when you look at the economy, the pandemic, the recovery efforts that the government is making, and of course the suffering that us, the Kenyans, are going through, I do not think this would have been the best thing to sort of impose on Kenyans. But now coming to KRA, I think, and we have mentioned this several times, when the government sets budgets, the government should always set budgets based on the economic status. Now, given these challenges that we're facing today, and looking at the figures that were sort of read by the CS a few weeks ago, it means that the government's projections might not be in line with the projected economic growth. Okay. I saw somebody somewhere saying that, we expect the economy to grow at 6%. But are we able, is that 6%, if it happens, because you don't know how far this COVID-19 is going to go, is that going to sort of cover the budget gaps or the expected generation of revenues by KRA within the next 1 year? That might not be possible. And certainly the rejection by the MPs from taxing these basic products will, bring down the projections and the expected collection of revenues by KRA.
Okay. Well noted. And Mwakesi, I don't know about you, but my dinner table had actually changed. Less ugali, less chapati, more traditional foods. But this is welcome news for a bread fan like me. Well, what say you about this briefly?
Jesse, thank you. Good morning, Kenyans. I think for me, when I considered the recommendations that were made by the Gladys Wanga committee, I find that they really went to be pro-Mwananchi on these particular proposals. I believe the removal of the tax recommendations that were made by CS Ukur Yatani on issues to do with bread, to do with motorcycles, to do with even the milk that we give to infant babies, These were things that were going to affect at the very basic household level. And so the removal of these recommendations is something that is much welcome. Additionally, I also want to commend the committee for having also stemmed what was an attempt by the CS Ukur Yatani to be able to impose additional tax or the rate in terms of VAT without having reference to Parliament. I think that was something that was quite welcome. But for Mwananchi, just your table could look better now with bread on the table. But the committee was proposing that there should be addition in terms of what you pay for airtime bundles and things like that. So as a proposed mechanism to boost up the revenues for government as well. They've maintained the things on gambling as well. So you can see that it was a balancing act for the committee on how to progress going forward. But at this particular juncture, Mwananchi is had a reprieve by virtue of these recommendations made by the committee, and I hope that we can go forward with a much clearer pro-Mwananchi budgeting cycle.
Okay. We'll definitely focus on this later on during this broadcast, even as we anticipate a quality debate on the floor of the House, as Sakwa Bunyasi put it, on this respect. Let's shift focus, gentlemen, to health matters right now. We well know we got a batch of vaccines that arrived in the country like 24 hours ago, but that was quickly followed by a plea by governors. Let's just run this story where governors from the Lakeside region actually now want to have direct access to buy the vaccines in order to sort of alleviate the suffering due to the pandemic in this particular region. That story was prepared just yesterday. It has been covered in today's Daily. Let's take a look at that report as we delve deeper into it.
13 Lake Region counties have been on the government's radar over the coronavirus surge in numbers. The government imposing strict COVID-19 control measures and declaring counties in Western Kenya and Nyanza regions COVID-19 hotspots. This has left county chiefs from the affected counties scratching their heads on the best possible way to flatten the curve. And now they want to be allowed to import COVID-19 vaccines directly as a way of stopping the rapid spread of the virus.
We are soon getting some vaccines in August, but even that number will not be enough New York has proved that if you vaccinate over 90% of the population that needs vaccination, you can put COVID at rest.
Prevention for COVID-19 infection since vaccines are not adequately available.
Led by Kakamega County Governor Wycliffe Oparanya, who also chairs the Lake Region Economic Bloc, the governors who held a summit to discuss the COVID-19 situation in the region say the importation will reduce the spread that continues to cause a major strain on health infrastructure.
What actually needs to be, if the national government can't buy, or if donations cannot be brought, what needs to be done is for the Ministry of Health to issue the proper protocols.
And we can set up some money aside to buy rapid test kits, but we need permission from the national government to do so. We are prepared as counties to do that, so that we can know much more accurately the extent of the spread of COVID-19 in our population.
In the block, over 2,000 new cases have been reported in the last 1 week, up from 1,589 in the previous week, with the caseload, according to the governors, constituting 16.1% of the total cases nationally. The surge in numbers has also led to insufficient oxygen, making a bad situation worse. Many patients are still admitted in the intensive care units across the region who require oxygen.
We need to increase capacities for oxygenation in the region. For us, fortunately for some of us, we are able to supply some of the oxygen to the other hospitals that don't have, but this is not enough.
Reports from the region indicate that hospital beds in major hospitals are full to capacity. And with the government receiving a consignment of 350,000 COVID-19 vaccines of AstraZeneca, county governments are optimistic their calls will be taken into consideration. Daniel Kariuki, KTN News.
So that's the state of affairs. The Lake Region governors calling for procurement of rapid test kits and asking to import vaccines directly. That's due to the surge in positivity cases in that particular region. Sakwa Bunyasi, your take on this, because the governors did mention that rapid testing is important in terms of fighting this particular virus, hinting to the fact that many people might be walking with it outside there without their knowledge. Well, what say you about the Lake Region preparedness to fight the pandemic?
I think it's a wonderful development that the level of concern among governors is even probably higher, I say that guardedly, maybe even higher than the national one. They are pushing as users of the vaccines and they want more and they want to have a hand in it. Yeah. I think that administrative and other financial restrictions, obviously 47 governors won't go out and negotiate separately. That this should be a clear message to the central government that the issue of vaccines, vaccine supply and vaccinations must remain on our front page. I think the upsurge in the 13 lakeside counties is a reminder to the rest of Kenya that if you're not there yet, it may catch up with you. So I'm sure that even the governors of the remaining counties that are not in the Lake region must be saying, how do we get vaccines to give us space? Now that the surge is not in our counties, how can we use this space to get sufficient vaccinations to get what they call the herd immunity? When you have many enough who have been ill, that incremental surges will not really have a major impact. And the infections don't move around as fast as if the vaccinations had not been completed or done at all. So I think it's, first it shows that it's really, those 13 counties are under siege in many ways. There's a lot of concern among citizens, but I'm very pleased with the public policy stance where the governors are speaking to the national government clearly, and I hope that the national government listens to their plea.
Okay. Mwakese, are you worried about the capacity or lack of it in the counties when we talk about testing, when we talk about the oxygen capacity in the counties, as well as the ability to combat the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, Jesse, when you consider that the capacities that we are probably talking about here are majorly on the question of procurement, because ideally what the Lake region is asking is that they would want the function of carrying out procurement taken away from the national government and allowed to the Lake region economic bloc to carry out this on their part. I think this is a good championing on their part because it allows for realistic assumptions about what you'd require, where you'd need to actually target in terms of your vaccination drives. And they want a real hand in managing the issue of health, because health is a devolved function, and rightly so. They are the most empowered constitutionally and also in terms of funds that are available to them to be able to carry out such a mandate. I think for me, the thing that I've been witnessing is that there have been a stronger push by the national government as well to get more doses in. I mean, we just received an additional batch from Denmark, I think yesterday. There's been talk about an AU-backed procuring of about 13 million doses of J&J vaccine, which is a single-dose vaccine, which would probably help much more in terms of helping Kenyans to be able to fight this. But in my view, I do agree with the governor's call and push to be able to not only get access to vaccines directly, but also to have an additional mechanism of rapid testing as opposed to the other complex testing mechanism. The PCR test, when you consider the time and the amount of money required to do them, the rapid testing kits would really help governors to be able to assess the situation much more clearly. Now, on the question of oxygen, I'm really surprised. We've been doing quite well. I think this week we were talking about exporting oxygen to Uganda. And it just tells of how we probably have done a better job than we had in the past of how we manage our oxygen supply. But I guess we still need to do a lot more to make sure that every single hospital in every county has access to oxygen plants and that they're made readily available in case of another outbreak that has been possibly touted across the country, not just the western region. Okay. We can just ask that the governors keep the momentum of pushing for more resources and more accountability from the national government.
Exactly. Prof, add your voice to this. I'm looking at the numbers. In Kisumu, 35% of the target population has been vaccinated against the virus. And in Kakamega, while battling the virus, they donated doses to a neighboring county as residents feared being vaccinated. So a lot of engagement with the public is definitely needed, even as we push for more vaccination of the population, right?
Yeah, Jesse, thank you very much. Just to add into what my colleagues have said here, I think what the governors have done is the right thing. We've always talked about pushing forward with local solutions to our local problems. And I think the governors of Western Kenya taking this leadership in ensuring that they lead the process of vaccinating the population out there is one of the ways that the Kenya should be working on. And it should not have gotten to this level. I think the national government should have taken lead, seeing what is happening across the world, and also understanding that the economy cannot open without getting to a certain level, percentage of vaccination of the population in this country. It is important to ensure that that devolvement of the fight or the vaccination process, the PCR or rapid testing, provision of kits is provided to the counties, not just in Western Kenya, but across the country. Two things. One, when you look at what the Africa Center for Disease Control is saying, the center is looking for, is proposing that the continent must get to a level of 200 vaccinations. By September, that would be 10% of the population. And of course, if we are to get back to normal, this has to go up to around 60-70%, so that we get this herd immunity. Okay. Now, that will help us get back to normal. But then there are a few things that we have to look at. When you ask for a vaccine that is also not available in the world, then the question is, where are we going to get these vaccines from? Why? Because the amount of vaccines available across the globe is not even enough in those countries that are producing the vaccines. You'll I mean, look at what we have out there in the US. US has supplies, as they've always told us. We have issues in Europe. India has not been able to vaccinate our population. And this is a challenge for Africa. Why? Because we are looking outwards instead of looking inwards. Number two is that Kenya is one of the leading economies in the continent. I think in size, GDP size, we are number 6 in the continent. But when you look at those countries that are pushing forward with producing their own vaccines, Kenya is not one of them. And to me, this is a shame, because you're talking about South Africa and then the Sahara countries, that is Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco, and of course Senegal in West Africa. Kenya should be one of the leading countries because of the level of economy where we are today, and also the need to get back to normal, and of course being the powers of this region, to take lead in sort of showing the other countries in East Africa or East and Central on the direction that we need to take if we are to get back to normal. Finally, I think there's a lot of politics about COVID-19 and of course the vaccination process. Why? Because we have enough resources actually to vaccinate our population. If the CS, in the health ministry, led the process in ensuring that when other countries were procuring these vaccines, instead of pushing money to KEMSA and KEMRI to be stolen by a few guys out there, if that money was set aside to be among the first countries to secure vaccines enough to get back to normal, that would have helped us and we would not be where we are today. Now we are fighting because you don't know what is going to happen, and the number of vaccines that arrived from Denmark yesterday are just a fraction of what is required to get us to where we want to be. And finally, I have been vaccinated. I got the first sort of dose, and I'm still waiting for the second one. Almost 3 months later, actually more than 3 months later, we're still waiting to get the second dose, which to me is not something that we need to be talking about at this moment. But let me say this. I was out in Zambia and South Africa last week. And of course, one of the issues that we face now when you travel out there is that you have to be vaccinated as you exit. You get vaccinated, not vaccinated, sorry. You have to be tested as you exit from the country, as you enter into the other country, and as you exit from the other country. This is making it so difficult for the kind of intra-regional trade that we expect to move us to the next level, of course, to achieve the SDGs, UN agenda, but also the Agenda 2063. So as we move forward, I think we should ensure, push our governments, especially ours in Kenya, to make sure that we take lead so that some of these issues that we're facing can be put under control and, of course, get us back to where we want to be within the shortest time possible.
Definitely. We'll want to mitigate the negative socio-economic impacts of the pandemic, even as President Uhuru Kenyatta just yesterday in Belgium advocated for Africa-made COVID vaccines. More details on page 6 of The Standard. I'd like to shift focus to education matters right now. A study was just released yesterday. It's covered on page 8 of The Standard, where thousands of girls got married and did not resume learning. That's according to that particular study. Get this, at least 160,000 girls got married during the period schools were closed following the outbreak of coronavirus in the country, even as another 100,000 girls were plunged into motherhood after being impregnated during the 9 months that schools were being closed. Sakwa Bunyasi, we talk of the issue to do with teenage pregnancies time and time again. We need a lasting solution to this particular issue, but it definitely needs the society's involvement. How do you look at this?
Oh, very, very difficult issue. First, at the national level, it's all statistics, and they are quite worrying statistics. 160,000 girls just during this 10-month period getting married, I guess partly because of the idleness from COVID, and a further 100,000 are pregnant and not married. That's 250,000. I'm just hoping the numbers are wrong. But if they're right, they are very, very significant, and I don't know where the numbers have really come from suddenly. I think wherever they are, we should get used to them on a regular basis. But the point I'd like to say is that each of these stories has a human dimension to it. It has a household. Household that's probably barely managing, and now their daughter comes home pregnant. They don't know how to handle it. Are we going to wait for that grandchild into the family? how shall we afford it? Because we can barely afford it, for example. And so they make quick decisions. If you have gotten pregnant, you're already going into the way of marriage, then why don't you go and join in with the father of the child? So the girl is pushed over to the parents of the boy, for example, as it would be in many rural areas. These are heart-wrenching decisions, not made on the basis of culture or anything like that, but simply just a question of coping, as a coping strategy in many, many places. And for many of the girls, once they get pregnant, their futures are changed forever. They can, for example, return to school, as we do in my own constituency, county, and I know it's done all over the country. They can return to school, but who's going to do the baby care? The schools don't have nursing arrangement. The families are eking out a living, literally, so there's not enough resources within the family to cater for the extra child. This is a crisis. It's not just an education crisis, it's also a livelihood crisis. And in many ways, it's the way by which poverty is reproduced within our households. The struggling families are sunk even deeper with additional mouths to feed, healthcare costs to meet, when there aren't any resources, surplus resources within those families. They sink into poverty, and there are many other implications of how that happens. Just say this is a big crisis, and I would hope that the Ministry of Gender, Education, working together, the Ministry of Gender, do some rigorous studies to underpin these numbers they are giving us, so they're not just headline numbers, because sometimes we get numbers and when you think through it, they don't quite look right. This one, over 250,000 cases, they think is probably overstated, but it points to a problem. We just now need to get deeper into it and to realize it's not just a statistic, there are household implications as well.
Quite so. Professor, how do you look at this? Because in terms of a solution, I picture the field officers from the Ministry of Education who can work with parents perhaps to curb these vices, because early pregnancies and early exposure to sexual tendencies will definitely affect the girls' education when we're speaking of quality education, you know.
Jesse, I concur with Mheshimiwa here that the disruptions that have been brought about by COVID-19 to the education system are unprecedented. I mean, this was unexpected, and I don't think we were ready to sort of get to the levels that we have gotten into. Number two, when you look at the issues around child or girl, school child pregnancies, these are issues that we've faced within, for the longest time possible. I think it's only that this time around, because of the COVID situation, we have taken it upon ourselves to go sort of getting numbers and putting statistics together to also, of course, measure the impact of this COVID-19 pandemic. But certainly, because most of these school-going kids are now at home. I mean, they spent almost a year at home with their parents and, of course, doing nothing. And given the difficult economic situation that most households are facing, it has been very difficult for families to sort of engage these young girls in ensuring that they live within the highest morality fabric that is required of them. Because, I mean, we have a shared responsibility when bringing up these young girls. When they go to school, then the teachers and the schools take that responsibility of helping parents to bring them up. But then the challenge now is that because of the economic hard times that we're facing at the moment, and given that parents are busy, of course, moving around, making a living or sort of raising resources to support their families, they, of course, have had a huge challenge in ensuring that they are there for their girls to sort of bring them up properly. Now, the challenge here is that the capacities that we have, not just at home or in the school, even within the government, is not enough to sort up this problem. What I would advocate for is sort of a multi-level sort of collaboration in handling this issue, that we bring all these stakeholders together. The government sets out, enough budget to support the process, but the government works with the parents and the schools, the teachers, the religious groups, NGOs, and everyone else to ensure that at least they come up with a framework of sort of working with these young girls to ensure that, one, they do not get into this situation of getting pregnant, but if they get into that, we have another sort of set of framework or policies set out there that we ensure that we do not just talk about making sure that all of them go back to school, but we have a way of making sure that we bring them out there to the schools so that they can go on with their education system, process. But then one challenge is that, as Mheshimiwa has put it, if we had a child care support in this course, it would be very helpful in bringing up these young girls. But then, given the situation, the problems that we're facing as a country, economic-wise, I don't think we'd get there sooner. So it is upon us as Kenyans, in all areas that we work in, to come up with ways of working together to ensure that we help in sorting out this issue. Otherwise, very soon, we'll have a society that has too many kids who do not have a system to support them and to bring them up. So, I look forward to coming up with a way of making sure that we are part of the process and not part of the problem.
Exactly. More details on page 8 of the Standard. And of course, grim statistics right there, even as they mentioned that more than 500,000 children did not return to school when they were opened in January this year. More details, make sure you grab yourself a copy. Allow us to take a short break right now. When we come back, we continue with the press review detailing or actually taking a look at the news making headlines in the papers. Stay with Morning Express.
This is KTN News.
Fried ginger has ginger oil, which is good for a healthy living lifestyle. It combines wonderfully on salads, stir-fries, when basted on roasted meat or simply sprinkled on your favorite dish. Available in 250 ml, 500 ml and 1 liter. Do your callers frequently ask you what stories made the news headlines? Introducing the Call Bulletin, courtesy of Skiza. You can now keep your callers informed and up to date with the latest news updates from KTN News, courtesy of Skiza. Dial *811 *795 hash to subscribe today. Set the tone with Skiza. Fried ginger has ginger oil, which is good for a healthy living lifestyle. It combines wonderfully on salads, stir-fries, when basted on roasted meat or simply sprinkled on your favorite dish. Available in 250 ml, 500 ml and 1 liter.
This is KTN News.
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Express. Thank you for staying with us. In case you're just joining us, welcome to the broadcast. We're taking a look at some of the stories covered in today's dailies. So make sure you grab yourself a copy. Joining me in studio to help us deliberate on this matters and more, Sakwa Bunyasi, Member of Parliament, Nambale constituency. I'm also joined by Professor right here, Mutisia, who is an economist. Thank you for your time, as well as our other guest, who's definitely not a new face to the show. And I'd like your take on this particular matter we were discussing right before we took the break, Mwakesi, on the statistics that have been released on this particular study, where thousands of girls seem to have gotten married and not have resumed learning due to the long break, quote unquote, due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Your quick reaction to this?
Well, Jesse, when you consider the numbers as they were presented in this particular study that was presented by the Deputy Chief of Staff, Rose Kagia, you could tell that the analysis that was done was not quite robust as you would anticipate from the ministry. And it's also a huge indictment on the capacity of both the ministry and the Ministry of National Government and Internal Security and Administration, because they, during the COVID period, had a simple role of ensuring that students who were out of school were kept in a manner that they would not be indulging in such kind of activities, and also ensuring that the community would work together to ensure that as many of these students are kept in a responsible way of living as opposed to what they would be doing while being in school. So I think for me, it's quite a very incriminating numbers and grim numbers for the government itself. However, my thinking is this. We have these statistics. 500,000 people young people have dropped out of school. There could be a fourth wave of COVID. What is government now doing to ensure that in the event that we have to shut down schools again, that we can be able to keep our students safe and away from this kind of activities that lead to early pregnancies and marriages and dropping out of school eventually? I don't think we have a robust mechanism in place yet. I remember during COVID period, one of the things that was being touted was to be able to do online learning and utilizing the television and programs like that would have kept students preoccupied during that particular period. I have not seen any robust policy mechanism coming forth in the education sector that will ensure that students, in the event of any such an outbreak again, they'll be kept quite busy and away from idleness and succumbing to this kind of extra activities. So in my view, I think the onus is on government going forward to ensure that they've come up with robust mechanisms. These teenage pregnancies have been happening year on year, regardless of the question of COVID. I think we need a proper national discourse on seeing how we can be able to tackle this challenge and ensuring that we keep as many young people in schools as possible.
Yeah, quite so. That's the goal. Not just education, but quality education. More details on page 8 of the Standard. Gentlemen, let's shift focus to politics. And Sakwa Bunyasi, I beg to ask, what's happening in NASA? Page 5 of the Standard, they mention 3 NASA principals plot to ditch Raila. And on the other side, on The Nation, they sort of mention that the One Kenya Alliance is built on sinking sand. Gideon's loyalty to One Kenya is in doubt as he skips key meetings. Well, what's your say on this, building alliances?
I think that, as usual, the media runs a bit ahead of the actual facts. It pulls along, I think, the facts. But a couple of truths. One is that the NASA Alliance has difficulties working as was originally intended, and that's obvious in the public domain. Yeah. And I think Honorable Musalia Mudavadi is the one, he put it quite nicely when he said there is a trust deficit. There's a complete lack of trust both among, within and between the principals. And clearly, you can't run an alliance along those lines. However, NASA exists in technical terms because the agreement is, so to say, valid, but not enforceable. So it has very little value, even though it's there. But it can be invoked. I guess if someone went to court and argued that you are still committed here, it can be committed there, and so on and so forth. But I think that it's fair to say that NASA in practice is dead. NASA in legal terms exists, but that has little utility. That's one. The second thing is the One Kenya Alliance is an idea that's evolving. Nothing has been penned really on the One Kenya Alliance, so we aren't there yet. One Kenya Alliance is not in the same league as NASA or Jubilee, which have got statutory instruments backing them. One Kenya Alliance is a club that is seeking to get formalized, and of course, some people will be right at the center of it, others will be at the edge, stepping in and stepping out, waiting for the moment when they must decide which side to do so. So I think we need a little more patience on that. Lastly, there are many interests within those perceived alliances and outside. the outside interests to the alliances are seeking to woo out members from within the alliance. The alliance itself will be seeking to woo in members that are in other alliances or not in any alliances yet. Yeah. It's still a state of expected chaos. So I think that we'll have to live with that for a bit. Now, the only thing is that what I find a little disturbing is that Kenyans have now gotten used to watching politicians like celebrities, like we do in the film industry. You look at somebody and say, oh, that's Denzel Washington. And, you know, people sort of say, wow, that, and so on. You look at somebody else, and there are many, many things, examples you can give. None, in all of this, despite our serious economic issues and political issues threatening the smooth functioning of this country, there's no discussion on that. Nobody is saying, if the One Kenya Alliance came together as it's proposed to be, what kind of policy framework were they likely to bring to bear? What do they believe in? How they run this country differently, both from a political and an economic point of view. And we're missing an opportunity. We're going to stampede into the elections with no direction set at this rate, except just the celebrity interests that we might have. So that's my only frustration about this process. Thank you, yes.
Okay, well noted. Personality-based style of politics, perhaps. That's what we're dealing with as a country. Mwakesi, your take on this, and perhaps your voice on the state of coalitions in the political landscape in the country. Because come 5 years, we see new outfits, same individuals. The next 5 years, they shift goals. What are we left with? Talk to us.
Thank you for that, Jesse. I think I like what Honorable Sako Bunyasi has said. I mean, we are now into very much celebrity politics more than anything else. If you can tell from what happened yesterday, it's just a bunch of 3 guys who stood outside a door and took a photo, and we're supposed to read all manner of things into that, and nobody knows anything beyond what they discussed. Of course, the fact that one person was not in the photo, Gideon Moi, has raised a whole lot of concern that maybe, oh, Gideon could be looking at different other things. We're not being very objective on how we analyze how these formations are going to affect our future in terms of politics, and rightly said, in terms of economics and what the big picture will be come 2022. In my view, I think the bigger headache for all these parties has been the question of what to do with 2022 now that it is not very clear who the big flag bearer or forerunner in that election would be on the side of NASA or vis-a-vis OKA. The president has been putting a lot of people in limbo with his statements that he's opting to look at one of the principals in NASA or within that coalition to be able to become the person he'll back come 2022. And so this has led to a lot of jostling around. Murathe is quite clearly saying that their preferred candidate is Raila Odinga. Raila Odinga has been skirting around the issues of whether he should be the one running in 2022 or not. And so this chaos is being formed because ideally there is no clarity on their end who exactly is supposed to be the front runner. On the other end, it seems there are people who are really against this idea of being confused at this particular critical moment. Charity Ngilu has been saying that it's important that they get their act together or else they'll see a storm coming, which probably the implication that she was trying to put across is that William Ruto is still looking very formidable going forward. And you can see from his end, it's quite clear that he's the front runner and he's very focused in what he's going to do come 2022. So I think in the next few months, 13 months remaining, we will expect a lot more of these discussions around coalitions, the formation, the dissolution of the same. There'll be a lot of organized chaos in the political front until they can be able to agree on who they will be able to front to be able to form a formidable match against the deputy president. But I think the deputy president is soldiering on quite well. Mudavadi is trying to single himself out. He's been clear in his mind that he carries the dreams and hopes of NASA with his party, and he's going out to do party recruitment. Let's see how this comes out. But Kenyans are watching, but Kenyans are more interested in seeing how their lives can be bettered within the next few months, because things have been very difficult for Kenyans for the past year and a half.
Okay. Prof, do you think we can walk away from personality-based style of politics? Because when I get the lingo from the politicians right now, the top league, some mention politics of reciprocity, promises that were made that haven't been kept. What do you make of this?
Well, I concur with my colleagues here that one, there are no political debts. So in politics, there are no debts, and it becomes a bit confusing when a very established and experienced politician comes on screens like this one and tells us that there was a promise that he or she will get this in 5 years or in the next election. Given that we've seen the kind of evolution of our politics that has taken place over the last 30 years. And two is that when you get closer to elections, this is what happens in Kenya. And there's nothing new, actually, that the same, I don't want to call them monkeys in the same trees or in the same forest, there's the same faces, the same personalities, shifting from one camp to another to somehow remain relevant and project their personal interests. Why you see this happening now is because 1 year before the elections, not even 1 year, I mean moving forward, we are going to see so many alliances and coalitions coming up. Actually, we did not know which would be the formidable coalitions that will come up between now and April of next year, when, of course, we'll now start the official or formal kind of campaigns in preparation for the August 9th elections next year. But I would like to say the following. One, I think Kenya is a special country. We are in eternal or perpetual politics. We play politics from day one. August 10th, 2022, we'll start playing politics of August 2027. And I think this distracts us from the core mandate of leadership and governance and politics in this country. Instead of thinking more of how to push our politics to promote or to support socio-economic transformation of the country, and of course uplift our people from their levels of development to a better level and compete with our peers in the continent and globally, we are busy sort of asking or fighting for who is going to be the flag bearer of this party, or who should be the president of this country come 2022. And we don't even know what is going to happen, because I mean with COVID-19, you can go up sooner than immediately, and you get forgotten before the elections come by. Number two, it is time for us, the voters or the electorate, to reprogram ourselves or repackage ourselves in a way that we are not here to listen to these guys who are always telling us about who should be the president of this country next year. Because we need to see their actions or the activities that they have undertaken, or the programs or initiatives to improve the lives of the people. Now, in a situation like today, when we are all talking about the negative impacts of COVID-19, we would be interested in seeing more of sort of utterances that will take us to a better level in fighting or in recovering from the pandemic itself. Now, we don't see this from all this. And leadership is about uplifting or leading people from where they are now to a better level. If we see that, and I think that is why William Ruto is taking leadership and seemingly becoming the lead candidate in the elections that we expect in 2022, because he's resonating with the people on the ground. And he's talking about issues that affect the common citizen, and that would help us, the citizen, to recover very quickly. If our other sort of candidates there, Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka, if their focus was on how to get out of this situation faster, then at least we'll be able to listen to them. But now we are here just listening to the same things that we've heard for the last 10 years. I mean, 2013, 2017, and now. I think we need to shift our focus from politics of personality, as we put it, to politics of substance, politics of action, and politics of development.
Speaking of politics, Sakwa Bunyasi, I just want your brief reply to some of the sentiments that have been aired throughout this week. No BBI, no elections. What do you make of this? Does it resonate with the people?
I do not think it does. And I think that's part of one of the problems of Kenya, that we have got decision makers who are not part of the establishment, would not know what position they hold. Those are individual views. I think it is important to have some of the reforms that have been outlined in the BBI. But if they can't fit into the time frame as required by law and the Constitution, which is that we have a date for elections, which is August 9th, 2022. If they don't fit into that timeline, then they can't be done before the election. I think we should learn to believe in ourselves and to respect our institutions. Because then if we say, oh, let us change the date so that this initiative is complete before we can hold elections, we are not different from the banana republics we see, where people, a leader doesn't want to go home and simply changes the constitution, changes the timing, or even suspends it. I think that the August 9th date has to be respected as a firm milestone that we've got, and let us do whatever we can do within it. Unfortunately,